In this video, we're going to go over Bill C21 and its terrible, terrible contents. Hello, welcome back. My name is Xander and welcome to Firearm Culture Canada. If you're returning, it's really good to see you again. If you're new here, please give us a wee subscribe. But we're going to cut right to it today and we're going to go over the contents of Bill C21 for you. Okay, let's go over Bill C21. It says, an act to amend certain acts and to make certain consequential amendments, firearms. Well, that makes no sense at all. That's just a mumbo-jumbo string of words. But let's go through it anyway, and you're going to find that a lot of this doesn't really make a lot of sense. Proposed changes to combat intimate partner and gender-based violence and self-harm involving firearms, fight gun smuggling and trafficking, help municipalities create safer communities, give young people the opportunities and resources they need to resist lives of crime, protect Canadians from gun violence, and subject owners of firearms prohibited on May 1st, 2020 to non-permissive storage requirements should they choose to not participate in the buyback program. These changes are outlined in Bill C21, so let's have a look at it there. So what they say first is introduce a new red flag regime that would enable anyone to make an application to a court for an order to immediately remove firearms for up to 30 days from an individual who may pose a danger to themselves or others, or a third party that may be at risk of providing access to firearms to an individual who is already subject to a prohibited order. So what they're saying there is basically anyone could call up the court and make an application at any point to get rid of your guns. So this could be like your neighbour down the street that doesn't like you for going out and shooting. This could be anybody. Individuals who are subject to a weapons prohibition order may be required to immediately surrender their firearms to law enforcement. The court may also make a seizure in order to temporarily remove the firearms on an urgent basis. This already happens. If you've got if you've got a weapons prohibition order, you don't have them. They've already taken them from you. So this whole thing here isn't new, and this is a weird thing for me. Weapon prohibition orders would help address situations where an individual poses a risk to themselves, their family, or to public safety, including perpetrators of intimate partner and gender-based violence, people at risk of suicide, and radicalized individuals. So, you know, I understand public safety and intimate partner and gender-based violence. That's good to me, and we can't deny that suicide is a problem. People do use guns for suicide, but to be fair, if you take their guns, they're just going to use something else. But what I really think they're going for here is this radicalized individuals, and they're probably going to put anyone who says, you know, more out there things online into that category. So if you're someone that speaks your mind online a lot, they might put you into this category and come to your guns one day and say, well, haha. Limitation on access orders would address situations where an individual subject to a prohibition order could have access to a third party's weapons. I'm not 100% sure what they mean by this one. Are they talking about if you've got a prohibition order, then you can't get like one of your, I don't know. I don't really get what they mean by this one. Maybe some of you can shed some light upon that in the comments. New applications for a weapon prohibition order could be made, and the court could set a hearing for a longer term prohibition order, up to 5 years, if there continues to be reasonable grounds to believe that the individual poses a public safety risk. This one does make a bit of sense to me. If someone has a weapon prohibition order, then it could be extended up to 5 years depending on how much of a safety risk that person is. I just hope it doesn't get abused. Yellow flag license suspension regime. The CFO would have the ability to suspend the individual's license up to 30 days if there's reasonable grounds to suspect that the individual is no longer eligible to hold a firearms license, and to investigate whether that individual continues to be eligible to hold a firearms license. So they already do this. When it expires, you have a grace period. I think the grace period is like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And during that time, there's absolutely no problems of you owning your firearms. I don't think you can buy anything in that time. Anyone could contact the CFO with information about a license holder. Yeah, they already have that. While surrender of firearms would not be required, the individual could not use their firearms or import additional firearms during the suspended period. If an investigation determines the individual continues to be eligible to hold a firearms license, use and acquisition privileges would be immediately reinstated, as they should be. If they misuse this and people lose their rights for a little while, that's not right. Require an individual to surrender their firearms during a legal challenge of license or registration certificate revocation and measures to help with the safety disposal of firearms if required. Now, a lot of this legislation just came out a couple of hours ago, so I know myself, I'm still digesting it and I don't fully understand it yet. And I'm not Runkle of the Bailey, so please don't take any of this as any illegal stuff. Don't do it. Increase maximum penalties for firearm trafficking, smuggling, and other firearm offences. Increase maximum penalties for firearm trafficking, smuggling, and other firearm offences. For example, possession of a loaded, prohibited, or restricted firearm, or possession of a weapon obtained by the commission of an offence, from 10 to 14 years imprisonment. You know, I'm all for them cracking down on illegal gun stuff. The trafficking and smuggling is partly where, I would say actually largely where a lot of the problems come from in Canada. And we know this, they're all coming from across the border, so if they're going to put more money into that, I got no problem with it. Allow proactive sharing of some firearm licensing and registration data between the RCMP and local law enforcement agencies for the purpose of investigation and prosecuting firearm trafficking offences. Require the Commissioner of Firearms to provide the Minister with an annual report by May 31st, including data on their disclosures. The federal government would create conditions on an individual's federal firearms license to restrict handgun storage and transport those in municipalities that pass bylaws to these effects. Any municipality has the option to pass bylaws related to handgun storage and transportation in their jurisdiction, such as prohibiting storage at home or anywhere else in the municipality boundaries, and limiting transport to or from the municipality. Breach of the federal firearms license conditions would carry a maximum penalty of 2 years imprisonment, as well as possible revocation of the firearms license. I think this one's really stupid, that they would actually allow every different little municipality and area to create their own laws like this, so then it'll be soon enough it'll be like America, where every state has a different law for everything. But what that says to me is a lot of people will start to move out of these municipalities that don't allow it, and they'll start going to greener pastures that are more firearm friendly. The anti-gang programming. The one thing that most firearm owners talk about as being a problem is gangs of guns. Gangs of guns. Gangsters shooting up each other in the cities all the time. That's where all the killings are happening. So the one big thing that we all care about, and all they're going to do, provide $250 million over 5 years. That's great. So you have all these structures and everything set up for every other little part of your new stupid Bill C21, but the actual biggest problem you're only going to provide money to, and that's it. I think a lot of these problems start with poverty, so that's what they have to address. Current maximum magazine capacity firearms sold or imported to Canada is 10 cartridges for most handgun magazines and 5 for most magazines designed for a semi-automatic centerfire long gun. This bill would make it an offence to alter a cartridge magazine to exceed its lawful capacity, with a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment on indictment for more serious cases, or 2 years less a day, and or a fine of $5,000 on summary conviction for less serious cases. I thought they already had laws and things in place for people that change magazines, because I know if you take a pin out of a pinned magazine, you're going to jail. So it's like the Liberal Party of Canada, they like to double up on their laws, and that's how they double whammy you. But then at least in my city, all the fucking junkies and scumbags run rampant and free in and out of jail every day, so you know, it's funny to see where their priorities are at. Anyone importing non-prohib ammunition would have to present a valid firearms license to a customs officer or complete a declaration form. Update the criminal code to ensure that any device, including an unregulated airgun that looks exactly like a conventional regulated firearm, i.e. shoots over 500 feet per second, is prohib for the purposes of import, sale, export and transfer. Current owners may keep their replicas but cannot transfer them. No further replica firearms could be imported into or sold transferred in Canada. This amendment does not affect other types of air guns that do not exactly replicate a conventional regulated firearm. So essentially, if it looks like a rifle or an AR, or maybe even a pistol, I'm not quite sure, if it basically looks like a real gun, they're wanting to crack down on that. Create an offence under the Firearms Act to prohibit businesses advertising that depicts, counsels or promotes firearm violence against a person, with a maximum penalty of 2 years imprisonment for a first offence and 5 years for each subsequent offence. I don't know of any company in Canada in the firearms community that actually depicts violence of any kind in their advertising. I don't think I've ever seen that. I've seen that in America. I've seen that in other countries, but I haven't seen that. Even at the ranges I go to, it's such a no-no to have a target with a silhouette of a human shape. If it's not a bullseye or an animal, they're not interested in it. Establish a non-permissive storage possession regime that would offer lawful owners of firearms and variants prohibit on May 1st, 2020 the option to keep their firearm. However, possession would be subject to strict conditions including no permitted use, no import, no further acquisition, no sale, and no... I don't think I can say that in Scottish. Owners who choose to retain these firearms would be required to comply with additional requirements, including successfully completing the related Canadian firearm safety course and upgrading to a restricted possession and acquisition license. What they're saying now is kind of what we thought would happen if you've got an AR or something that was on that list of 1500 plus firearms and still growing. It's going to be a safe queen for the foreseeable future. Hopefully a future change in leadership will reverse that. And for anything that's been upgraded to a restricted or a prohib, if you didn't have that beforehand, they're going to force you to take the restricted course at your own cost. Review firearm classification, including whether to prohibit assault style firearms by definition in the criminal code instead of by make and model and regulations, to be initiated by the Minister of Justice. Modernise language in the regulations and criminal code with respect to prohib weapons, prohib devices and prohib ammo to close the gaps in law. The classification reviews would begin once the proposed legislation is reviewed by Parliament. Provide security personnel at the Bank of Canada and the Royal Canadian Mint with public officer status so they can possess and carry any firearm considered necessary to protect their premises and the public. Well, that's funny because I was under the impression that both of them were already armed. But if they're not already armed and they're not valid RPAL holders, why are they being given officer status? Enable the Governor and Council to designate employees of Crown entities as public officers so they can carry any firearms for security reasons. So they want to take away your guns as the legal owner, but then they want to give it to like security guard Jim that couldn't become a police officer. Amend the Firearms Act provisions to make the Commissioner of Firearms the only person authorised to grant ATCs for protection of life and formalise the administrative requirements to grant them in the firearm regulations, which I suppose makes sense because from what I hear they don't give out very many. The bill would transfer responsibility for the Trans-Border Inadmissibility Framework for the Minister of Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship to the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness to better align with the Minister's responsibilities for border management, immigration enforcement and criminal law enforcement. Expand protections for nuclear security officers, including nuclear response force members, by granting them limited peace officer status. Their scope would be limited geographically to the facility itself and only those peace officer powers required to fulfill their duties. Create a standalone regime for licensee to acquire special equipment, including firearms, to carry out security functions at their facilities. Establish a new public complaint process. For the most part, pretty rough stuff. I really don't like what I'm seeing on it. I don't like what I'm reading on it, but I do have to say when I woke up this morning and watched it live, after processing it for a little while, I really do think that this could have been a lot worse. And I know people won't like to hear that, but this could have been a lot worse. They could have outright said ban on 1500 types of handguns and pistols and revolvers. Sniper rifles are gone. It could get a lot worse, and I think right now we're on a slippery slope. So make sure you donate to the CCFR. Thanks again for watching. Take care now.